Welcome back to Mirror Mind, the channel where we see through the illusion, expose narcissistic abuse, and help you heal from the inside out. If you're here, it's because you're looking for clarity, peace, and maybe even answers that no one else has been able to give you. You're not alone, and you're in the right place. Chapter 1. What is mirroring? Let's start simple. Mirroring is when someone reflects back to you your own traits, values, and behaviors almost like a human mirror. In normal, healthy relationships, this can happen naturally. People resonate with each other, they pick up shared interests, and they create common ground. But in the hands of a narcissist, mirroring becomes a weapon. Narcissistic mirroring isn't about genuine connection. It's about strategic manipulation. They observe you. They learn your emotional language. They see what makes you tick. Then they copy it not to connect, but to control. You say you love poetry? Suddenly they're quoting Rumi. You mention you've been through trauma? They say they have too. You talk about boundaries? They claim to honor them. They seem perfect, almost too perfect. That's because they're not real. They're reflecting you, not revealing themselves. Chapter 2. Why Narcissists Mirror. Let's go deeper into the why. Narcissists don't have a strong sense of identity. Inside, there's a void, a deep insecurity, a fragile ego that can't tolerate rejection, shame, or feeling less than. So what do? They build a false self, and one of the fastest ways to do that is by stealing yours. They mirror you to gain your trust quickly, make you feel like you've found your soulmate, shortcut real intimacy, gather information to use later. It's not love. It's not admiration. It's strategy. Chapter 3. The Soulmate Illusion. Have you ever felt like someone just gets you right from the start? Like they finish your sentences. They know your favorite songs. They say they've been through the exact same thing. It feels magical, right? This is often the honeymoon phase of narcissistic mirroring. You're not crazy, the connection feels real. But it's not mutual. It's one-sided. The narcissist is creating an illusion of compatibility by feeding you back to yourself. It's emotional camouflage, and it's intoxicating. This is what makes leaving so hard later. Because you're not just losing a person, you're losing the version of yourself you saw in their eyes. Chapter 4. Mimicry, the next layer. Mirroring is about reflecting your identity. Mimicry goes even further. It's about copying your emotions, behaviors, and language. Let's say you start crying. The narcissist starts crying too. You share a deep personal story. They suddenly have one that's eerily similar. You talk about narcissistic abuse, and they claim they were abused by a narcissist. It gets confusing. Are they being vulnerable? Are they empathizing? No, they're mimicking. Mimicry is about blending in so they don't get caught, so they don't lose supply, so they always stay one step ahead. Chapter 5. When mirroring turns into weaponization. At first, mirroring feels connecting, but eventually it becomes exploitation. How? The things you shared, your dreams, fears, vulnerabilities, are cataloged, stored away, not for safekeeping but for future use. You told them you hate abandonment? Later, they ghost you. You said you're sensitive to criticism? They'll mock you with jokes that hit your deepest wounds. You opened up about childhood trauma? They'll bring it up in a fight to discredit or shame you. This is not just betrayal. It's emotional warfare. And you may start asking yourself, did I make all this up? Were they ever real? Am I the problem? You're not. You were mirrored, mimicked, and manipulated. Chapter 6. Trauma Bonding Through Mirroring. Let's talk about trauma bonding. One of the most powerful psychological traps created through mirroring and mimicry. When a narcissist mirrors your pain, they often appear as someone who gets it. They might say, I went through the exact same thing. No one else has ever understood me like you do. We're both survivors. And because your trauma is real, you feel seen. You feel validated. You finally feel understood. But here's the twist. They're using your pain to forge a false bond. It's not a connection based on healing. It's based on control. The narcissist mirrors your suffering not to build empathy, but to gain access. Once you feel emotionally close, you're more likely to excuse red flags, tolerate manipulation, and even defend their behavior. And by the time the abuse becomes clear, you're already hooked. Chapter 7. Mimicry in the love bombing phase. Love bombing is a classic narcissistic tactic, and mirroring is the fuel that powers it. In the love bombing phase, mimicry makes everything feel urgent, romantic, and destined. You like hiking? They suddenly want to go every weekend. You mention your favorite meal. They spontaneously make it for dinner. You talk about spirituality. They start quoting Rumi, Eckhart Tolle, or even your favorite pastor or guru. This is not coincidence. This is curated chemistry. It's a carefully staged performance. They're studying your likes, dislikes, values, and beliefs, then mimicking them to become your perfect match. You don't fall in love with the narcissist. You fall in love with your reflection. And when that illusion starts to crack, the confusion can be unbearable. Chapter 8: When the mask slips. Eventually, it happens. The narcissist's performance becomes inconsistent. The mirroring slips. The mimicry feels off. You start noticing things like they forget the details of the stories they mimicked. Their reactions don't align with their shared values. They suddenly contradict things they once said were important to them. And most of all, you begin to sense there's no core self behind the mirror. This is where cognitive dissonance kicks in. You think, but they were so caring, they were so thoughtful, they knew me so well. Yes, they studied you. They rehearsed you. They impersonated a version of you to get close, gain your trust, and feed off your emotional energy. That's why it felt real. But it wasn't mutual. It was calculated. Chapter 9: Why it hurts so much. People often ask, why does it hurt so deeply? Because you weren't just deceived by another person, you were reflected back to yourself. Your dreams, your values, your childhood memories, your spiritual beliefs, all of that was used to construct a fantasy, and then, just as suddenly, it was shattered. That betrayal goes beyond a breakup. It's the loss of a mirror that made you feel seen, a story you thought was shared, a connection you thought was safe. And now you're left wondering, was any of it real? Who was I even talking to? Did they ever care? Those are painful questions, and they deserve compassionate answers. Chapter 10: The Role of the False Self. Let's go deeper into the psychology of it all. The narcissist doesn't present their real self to you because, frankly, they don't know who that is. Instead, they create a false self, an idealized mask built from pieces of other people, media, fantasy, and most of all, you. This false self is charming, intelligent, spiritually aligned, emotionally deep. It's everything they think you want. But it's not stable. The false self requires constant fuel, admiration, attention, validation, otherwise it starts to crack. And when it does, that's when you meet the real personality underneath, often angry, cold, entitled, and devoid of empathy. But you might still cling to the illusion, hoping the real person will come back. The one who mirrored your soul. The one who seemed so in tune. That person never existed. It was you reflected through their mask. Chapter 11: The Imitation of Empathy. One of the most chilling elements of narcissistic mimicry is false empathy. When a narcissist mirrors your emotions, it can seem like they are the most emotionally attuned person you've ever met. They nod when you cry. They finish your sentences. They say things like, I feel everything you feel, or I carry your pain too. But real empathy is grounded in authentic presence, a deep and compassionate understanding that comes from listening, validating, and showing up consistently. What the narcissist offers is performative empathy, a rehearsed, strategic display that looks real but is designed to serve one purpose: control. They want you to feel safe, dependent, emotionally exposed because that gives them more power to manipulate. Once you're emotionally open, they can twist your words, use your vulnerabilities against you, and make you doubt your own instincts. So when that empathy disappears suddenly, coldly, without explanation, it feels like emotional whiplash. You think, how could someone who understood me so deeply now act like I'm nothing? Answer: because it was never empathy. It was a mask, and masks don't feel. Chapter 12: Mimicking Growth, Healing, and Change. This chapter is one of the trickiest and most painful. You catch them lying. You call out the manipulation. You say, this isn't okay. And they say, you're right. I need to grow. They promise to go to therapy. They read self-help books. They start talking about trauma, inner child work, maybe even narcissism itself. For a moment, you believe. You think, finally. They get it. But here's the truth. Narcissists can mimic healing just like they mimic love, empathy, or values. They may adopt the language of therapy. I'm doing shadow work, I'm owning my triggers, I'm trying to reparent myself, but there's no actual shift in behavior, no real self-reflection, no accountability. It's not change. It's a new disguise. A narcissist will mirror the language of healing if it keeps you in the relationship. They know that hope is a powerful hook, and they'll weaponize your desire for healing to keep you emotionally entangled. Chapter 13: Group Mirroring, Winning Over Your Circle. Mirroring and mimicry don't just happen one-on-one. Narcissists often extend the act to your family, friends, or community. You bring them to a gathering and suddenly they're quoting your dad's favorite sports team, helping your mom in the kitchen, laughing at your friend's obscure jokes, talking politics like your siblings do. It feels like they fit in effortlessly. Why? Because they're mirroring the room. They're scanning the emotional climate and adjusting their mask to match. This serves two purposes. It earns them trust and admiration from others, which strengthens their control. It isolates you by making others think they're amazing, you're lucky to have them. If things go wrong later, your social circle may doubt you. They might even side with the narcissist because they were also deceived. It becomes even harder to break free when everyone around you has been pulled into the illusion. Chapter 14, The Collapse of the Mirror. There comes a moment, often slowly, sometimes suddenly, when the mirroring breaks down. You start asking questions. You set boundaries. You stop performing the role they assigned you. And then you see what was always there. The indifference behind the charm. The entitlement behind the empathy. The rage behind the calm. This is the collapse of the mirror, when the narcissist can no longer sustain the false identity and their true self begins to show. And often, they won't just walk away. They may try to discard you cruelly, smear your name, play the victim, or switch back into mimicry temporarily to hoover you back in. It's disorienting, painful. It might make you question your entire reality. But it's also a breakthrough. Because once the mirror shatters, you finally stop chasing the illusion. You stop waiting for the old version to return. You begin to see who they truly are, and more importantly, who you are without them. Chapter 15, Reclaiming Your Identity After Being Mirrored. Here's the hopeful part. Mirroring and mimicry don't just steal your sense of safety, they confuse your sense of self. You may ask, who am I outside of that relationship? What did I actually believe? What parts of me were real and what parts were reflected? This is where healing begins. Reclaiming your identity means making decisions based on your own values again. Saying no even when it feels scary. Rediscovering hobbies, friendships, and dreams that were shelved. Allowing space for uncertainty and rebuilding without shame. You were never too trusting, too loving, or too naive. You were mirrored and now you are emerging. Your self-worth was never broken, it was just temporarily distorted. And the deeper truth? No one can take your identity without your permission. And now you're taking it back, piece by piece, day by day. Chapter 16, The Narcissist's Empty Core. Behind all the mirroring, mimicry, and manipulation is a simple yet powerful truth. The narcissist has no solid sense of self. This is the engine behind the entire performance. They aren't just pretending to be someone else for fun or strategy, they need to pretend because there's nothing stable at the core. No grounded identity. No genuine inner compass. This is what psychologists often refer to as the false self, a carefully constructed personality made from borrowed pieces of other people. Without this mask, the narcissist risks confronting something they desperately avoid, their own emptiness, shame, and fear of insignificance. That's why they imitate your passions, adopt your worldview, reflect your desires, mold themselves into who you want them to be. It's not love, it's survival. They're trying to secure attention, validation, and control because without it, their fragile ego could collapse. It's deeply sad, but it's also incredibly dangerous because to keep that mask alive, they will betray, exploit, and destroy the very people they mirrored. Chapter 17, The Role of Shame in Narcissistic Mimicry. Shame is the hidden fuel behind much of the narcissist's behavior. They live in constant fear of being exposed, of having their inadequacies seen. So instead of confronting that shame and working through it like emotionally healthy people do, they cover it up with performances. Mirroring becomes a shield. Mimicry becomes camouflage. If they can become the version of themselves you admire, then maybe they won't have to face their own unworthiness. But shame is persistent. It leaks out in cruelty, in rage, in blame-shifting, in quiet disdain. They might accuse you of being fake. They might rage at you for not understanding them. They might punish you for seeing through the act. Because deep down, narcissists are not just ashamed of who they are, they're ashamed of not knowing who they are. So they perform. And when that performance starts to crack, their shame turns outward, aimed at the people closest to them. Often, at you. Chapter 18, Why You Fell for the Mirror. Let's take a moment to shift focus, not on them, but on you. If you're watching this and realizing you were mirrored, tricked, or emotionally manipulated, it's easy to fall into self-blame. How could I be so blind? Why didn't I see the signs? Was I just foolish? But here's the truth, you weren't foolish, you were human. You wanted connection. You were open, kind, and emotionally attuned. You shared your truth and you expected that honesty to be met with respect. That's not a weakness. That's a strength. That's a reflection of your emotional health. Narcissists don't mirror just anyone. They target emotionally intelligent, deeply empathic, resilient people because those people carry the very qualities the narcissist lacks and envies. You fell for the mirror because it reflected you. Your love. Your passion. Your sensitivity. Your dreams. You were not tricked because you were stupid. You were tricked because you were real and they were not. Chapter 19. Breaking the spell. Once you realize you've been mirrored, it can feel like waking up from a dream. The spell starts to fade. But that awakening isn't always smooth. You may grieve the person they pretended to be, doubt your memories, experience cognitive dissonance, they were so good but also so cruel, feel guilt for still missing them. This is all part of breaking the spell. Narcissistic mirroring creates a false emotional bond. You weren't connecting with their true self. You were bonding with a version of you that they performed back to you. So now your work is to reconnect with the real you. What do you feel? What do you want? What do you need? One of the most powerful acts of healing is to trust yourself again, to listen to your intuition, to rebuild your boundaries, to choose yourself over the illusion. You are not what they reflected back at you. You are what you reclaim when the mirror breaks. Chapter 20. Rising beyond the reflection. Let's end on this. Hope. Yes, narcissistic mirroring is painful. Yes, mimicry can devastate your sense of identity. Yes, the betrayal runs deep. But also, this experience can lead to the most profound kind of self-awareness. You learn to notice red flags early, to set strong, compassionate boundaries, to prioritize authenticity over chemistry, to stop over-explaining and start walking away, to see your empathy as a gift, not a weakness. You begin to rise beyond the reflection. You stop chasing what was never real. You stop asking, why did they do this, and start asking, what do I want now? You become more you than you've ever been, not because of what they did, but because of what you chose to heal. The mirror broke, but your spirit didn't. You're still here, wiser, stronger, and finally, real. And that's something no narcissist can ever mimic.